Stop, Dad. The handkerchief is poisoned. Don't touch it. Nia's voice sliced through the imperial hush of the St. Aurelia Conservatory like a siren in a museum. Heads in satin and black ties swiveled toward the last row. Sequins hissed, heels scraped, whispers collided. At the altar framed by a string quartet and a wall of orchids, Adrian Locke media magnate, civic darling, an American myth in a tux froze with his hand hovering over the white silk tucked into his breast pocket. He blinked, slow as a man pulling out of a dream, and turned toward the slim girl who had shouted. "Naya," he said, the name both question and plea. She stood now, trembling, her chocolate-brown fists balled at her sides. "Please, Dad, don't touch it. It's poisoned." Her voice cracked and rose. "I saw her. She put something on it." Silence cratered the hall. Even the chandeliers seemed to lean in. Adrian took a half step away from the altar, color rising beneath his immaculate shave. "Sweetheart," he began gently, like a man coaxing a skittish foal. "Come here. It's all right." Nia didn't move. Her eyes were huge, terrified but steady. "You don't understand. I saw her do it. She dipped your handkerchief in something last night in her dressing room. It smelled like chemicals. It burned her hand." "Nia," he sighed, crouching slightly as if the air itself might spook her, lowering his voice to a soothing bass. "I know this is hard. You miss your mom. Serafini isn't trying to replace." "I'm not making this up," she cried. "Please believe me." From the front pew, Vivian Locke Adrian's older sister, posture like marble and tongue like a scalpel shot to her feet. "Security," she hissed as if summoning a curse. "Remove that child at once. This is disgraceful." At the altar, Seraphine Vale, today's bride, all lace and luminous calm, the city's favorite philanthropist with cheekbones engineered by angels, gave a soft laugh without any light behind it. The corners of her eyes didn't move. "It's okay," she murmured, gliding a manicured hand to Adrian's sleeve. "She's overwhelmed. This is so much for her. I understand." But Naya's voice surged louder, bright enough to burn through doubt. "Then prove it." Murmurs rippled, furtive at first, then curious, then something with teeth. Nia walked into the aisle, her patent shoes clicking on the century-old wood like a gavel. She reached into the little crossbody bag slung over her chest, pulled out a flash drive, and lifted it high. "Watch this. It's from the car cam. Mr. Theo copied it for me." Seraphine's grip tightened on her bouquet. The flowers trembled. Only the flowers. All eyes didn't begin to cover it. Attention coagulated around the bride in a visible halo. Seraphine's smile faltered barely a glitch, a hairline crack in porcelain. "That's absurd," she said lightly, voice stretched taut as a violin string. "A child's imagination. Grief does strange things." "Then prove it," Nia repeated, firm now, clear as a bell. She took another step down the aisle and produced a pair of disposable gloves, the kind Adrian used to handle rare first editions in his study. "Put on these. Use them to pick up the handkerchief, then wipe her face with it." No one breathed. You could hear the building think. A guest in the back whispered too loud. If it's safe, should do it. The whisper rolled through the hall like wind through wheat. Adrian looked at Nia, really looked, and something shifted in his face that had nothing to do with cameras or optics. He slid the gloves on with the deliberate calm of a surgeon, drew the white square of silk from his pocket, and held it to the light. Tradition turned trap between his fingers. "Is it true?" he asked without looking away from Seraphine, his voice low enough to vibrate the floor. Seraphine blinked and gave a delicate, incredulous laugh. "Darling, you can't be serious." "I'm asking you a question." Her veil trembled with the tiniest breath. "Of course not. I would never." Adrian didn't answer. He turned to Nia. She stood in the center of the aisle, small as a bird and fierce as a verdict. In her eyes he saw not theatrics, not rebellion, but heartbreak, the specific kind that blooms when the person you depend on chooses not to believe you. Let's go to the vestry, Seraphine urged, the smooth reassurance of a woman who had practiced empathy like choreography. We'll sort this out privately. Don't let this ruin our day. If it's harmless, Mia said, her voice almost a whisper that somehow carried to the rafters, you won't mind. Something cracked, not glass, not a heart, but the spell of inevitability. Adrian turned to the priest. A moment, Father. He looked back at Seraphine. Will you allow it? She took a single step back, not even the length of a breath. I will not be insulted like this, she said, each word polished and sharp. Not in front of the entire city. That's not an answer. Jonah Pierce called from the second row, Adrian's business partner, blunt as a brick and loyal like gravity. Vivian shot him a look that could salt the earth. Prove it, Adrian said, and the room went quiet enough to hear a moth change its mind. In the quiet came footsteps, quick, uneven. A young usher in a slim black suit stumbled up the aisle, pale and panting. Mr. Locke, he gasped. Sir, Mr. Raines, Theo Raines, the driver you asked him to. They found his car at Pike and Laurel. Brake lines cut. He's in the at Mercy General. He asked for you, and for Nia. A sound left Seraphine like a hinge catching. It could have been surprise. It could have been calculation. Nia's breath hitched. Adrian's jaw set. Father, he said without looking away from the world ending in front of him, please ask the guests to remain seated. He took Nia's hand. It was cold as rain. For the first time in weeks, she didn't pull away. They slipped down the side aisle into a little stone corridor that smelled like candle smoke and ghosts. Adrian crouched to Nia's height. Tell me everything. It poured out the dressing room, the faint sting in the air like a science lab left open, the red marks on Seraphine's fingertips after she tested the cloth, the leather case she never let out of sight. The late-night call Nia overheard through a cracked door. No one will suspect if it's slow. If it looks natural, Theo helping her pull the car cam footage. Nia's plan. If she couldn't stop the ceremony upstairs, she'd play the video downstairs on the LED wall during cocktails. She hadn't planned on her voice betraying her first. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Adrian asked, and the second the words left his mouth, regret followed them. I tried, Nia said. You were busy. You said I was being dramatic. She swallowed. You were in love. He closed his eyes. The human body should not be able to hold this much shame. When he opened them, they were different. We're leaving. What about the wedding? There isn't going to be one. They re-entered the hall to a murmuring sea. Seraphine hadn't moved. Adrian walked to the microphone with the calm of a man who had survived worse than public failure. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice amplified into every chandelier and rib bone in the room. Thank you for being here. The ceremony will not continue. Seraphine's composure cracked like ice under a heel. You're throwing this away based on a child's. I said that's enough. The boardroom edge in his tone cut clean and left no blood. Security, please escort Miss Vale to the waiting room. She is not to leave the building until questioned. What about the poison? Someone called. Adrian held up the handkerchief in the glove. It suddenly looked medieval, an instrument masquerading as a prop. This will be tested immediately. If it's clean, I'll apologize publicly. If it's not, then the person I trusted almost murdered me. Seraphine dropped her bouquet. The petals sounded like rain. She met Nia's eyes across the distance, a flash of undressed hatred. Then she smiled very sweetly and let the guards guide her away. There was polite applause over by the benefactor section, the brittle kind people used to cover a sneeze. In the back row, a few guests clapped for real, hard enough to sting their hands. Adrian pulled Nia into a hug he should have given her weeks ago. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, he whispered into her braids. I know, she whispered back. Believe me now. 3 hours later, the wedding that wasn't had calcified into trending hashtags. Hashtag handkerchief gate, hashtag believe Nia, Hashtag girl boss gaslight gate keep trending at number 3 because the internet can't resist itself. Adrian and Naya sat in the back of the black Lincoln, rolling past the courthouse toward Mercy General. A Ziploc bag sat on the seat beside Adrian. The handkerchief sealed like evidence in a TV show, except it wasn't TV. The city throbbed around them, horns, sirens, a helicopter like an angry dragonfly. Naya handed over the flash drive like a relic. Theo made 2 copies, she murmured, in case. And this has everything? The car cam. The audio. She didn't realize it records when the engine idles. She said. Nia stared at her knees. She said the timeline was perfect. The handkerchief would make it look natural. She said by the time anyone figured it out, the money would be safe. She said 800 million. Adrian's head snapped to her. She said the number. Nia nodded. It wasn't public, right? No, it wasn't. 800 million was the true sprawl of his media holdings and private funds, post-restructuring algebra, known to exactly 6 living souls and 2 dead ones. A muscle jumped in his jaw. At Mercy General, Theo Raines lay under harsh lights. The clean hospital smell fighting old oil and cigarette smoke baked into his bones. He grinned when he saw Nia, a lopsided, stubborn grin his wife had always called the mule face. You brought your dad? He rasped. About time. You saw it? Adrian asked. Didn't need to see to believe the kid, Theo said, pointing at Nia with the hand that worked. But yeah, it's convincing. She wanted a quiet funeral with closed casket and tasteful sorrow. Classy. A detective in a charcoal suit appeared in the doorway like a period at the end of a sentence. Mr. Locke? Detective Rowan. First, thank you for preserving the footage. Second, we ran the name Surfing Veil through the fund databases. That's one of her names. Her legal passport reads Sofia Volkanova. Interpol's been looking for her for 5 years. Nia's breath turned to steam. For what? Rowan scanned his notes. Suspicious deaths in Vienna, Geneva, and Naples. All wealthy, all apparently natural. We think she's connected to a private network shell companies, consulting fronts. There's a name that repeats, Dmitry Sokolov. Theo winced. Heard that once, diner on West Halsey. She thought I was dozing. Said Dmitry twice. Said the word backup like a lullaby. Rowan nodded, grim. We're moving her to a holding facility now. She's lawyered up with a firm that bills by the minute of oxygen. Adrian's spine straightened. I want armed security on my home, on Nia. We're already on it. That night, in his home office, Adrian stood with his back to a window that reflected a man he almost didn't recognize. The city beyond gleamed like a promise it never made. Downstairs, a protection detail sipped burnt coffee and pretended not to be human. Nia drifted into the office, clutching a drawing 3 stick figures holding hands. One with a heart on her chest crossed out in red. It's us, she said simply. Before and after, he knelt. She will never be near us again. He placed a pendant in her hand, a little silver disc with a GPS tracker micro-soldered into its belly. Squeeze it if you're scared. It talks to the sky. Mia squeezed. It beeped once, politely, like a butler clearing his throat. The next afternoon, Detective Rowan returned with a file that smelled like toner and secrets. We've pulled financials on Sofia Volkanova, offshore accounts, Luxembourg and Belize. We cross-referenced airline manifests with burner phone pings. She met Sokolov in Prague 3 years ago. We don't have proof of the money flow, yet. He slid a grainy photo across the desk. A gray-bearded man in a leather jacket stood outside a school, sunglasses in the rain, watching the doors. Yesterday, outside Nia's school. He waited 10 minutes, then left. Nia's stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. He didn't approach, Rowan said, but he didn't need to. We're pulling her from school until this is over. It was supposed to be over. It never is. That night, a package arrived addressed to Nia in a clean, careful hand. The bomb text kited, proud of it, declared it not explosive, and only then did Adrian slide the envelope open with a letter opener that had belonged to his grandfather. Inside lay an old photo, a young woman pregnant and radiant, arm-linked with a man Adrian didn't recognize but felt he should. On the back, a cursive whisper, "Do you really know what she kept from you?" He made a phone call to a voice he hadn't used since the kind of night men don't talk about. "It's Locke," he said. "I need a favor." "You always do," the voice grunted. "You've got 10 seconds. I need everything on Sofia Valkanova, aka Seraphine Vale, including any intelligence ties and known associates stateside." "You in trouble, Adrian?" "Not yet," he said, "but I'm about to be." At 3 a.m., the phone crackled back to life. "She's not just a con, she's a recruiter," the voice said. Project Tartar's black program that didn't die so much as move houses in 2009. She lures assets, seduces, blackmails, marries, and Sokolov, he's clean up. One more thing, that photo, not your late wife. It's Valkanova 15 years ago, pregnant, with Sokolov's kid. Your girl's not biologically yours. The room tilted. Adrian put a hand out and missed the desk by a breath. Through the doorway, Nia's nightlight spilled a brave little circle of gold on the hallway floor. He pressed the phone so hard to his ear, it left an ache. "Say that again. You heard me." When dawn crawled through the blinds, Nia clinked cereal into a bowl and poured too much milk because that's what you do when the world might be fake. Adrian sat across from her, his flannel shirt smelling like coffee and regret. "Do you remember anything from before you came to live with me?" he asked softly. She thought, a lady with yellow hair. "She gave me chocolate coins." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You know I love you." Her smile was instant and small. "I love you too, Dad." Whatever else the world was, that part was true. By noon, Rowan was back with more rotten fruit. One of Sokolov's properties in the Catskills' old research clinic decommissioned and reborn as something else. If Sofia gave birth there, there might be records. If there are records, there's leverage. The drive north was long and red and gold with early fall stripping the hills. Nia fell asleep with her forehead against the window, her breath fogging the glass in soft human circles. Adrian drove like a man who had once learned to do very difficult things very calmly and had forgotten how good he'd been at it. The clinic stared at them with boarded windows and a rust-stained smile. Inside, dust knew everyone's name. But the basement hummed with that cruel, clean hum new machines make. Behind a locked cabinet, alphabetized files waited with the patience of paper. Rowan found it, Valkanova, Sofia, ultrasounds, fingerprint sheets, a newborn's hospital band, a photo, a tiny left wrist with a small birthmark like a star smudge. Nia had that mark. Adrian felt something unclench and bleed at the same time. Truth hurts when it's real. Back in the city, Sofia Valkanova ankle monitor blinking like a Christmas gag, paced her rented penthouse like a predator. She dialed a burner. "Plan B," she said. "Execute." The next night, the Locke Foundation gala Adrian's annual Valentine to civic decency twinkled inside the Palmetto Hotel's ballroom. The chandeliers were drunk on themselves. The mayor slapped backs and promised things into microphones. Adrian worked the room with a practiced smile and a stomach full of barbed wire. Nia wasn't there. She was upstate, tucked away in a safe cabin with Agent Rowan and 2 people who looked like accountants and moved like sharks. One of the garden cameras just picked up someone. A guard murmured into Adrian's sleeve, "Your bride." Alone, Adrian stepped into the rear garden, where lanterns swung and roses pretended nothing bad ever happened. Sofia stood under a trellis, wearing midnight blue in a posture that said the world belonged to her if she wanted it. "What a night," she sighed, not turning. "Almost makes you believe the universe is a fan." "Cut the monologue," Adrian said. "Why are you here?" To tell you the truth. She faced him with the coy calm of a cat in a bird sanctuary. They won't let you keep her. The girl isn't a daughter, she's an asset. The science woven into hers. He took a step closer, careful and mean. She's a child. She's a key. Sophia snapped, mask slipping a fraction. Her immunity is proof of concept. Do you know what governments pay for proof? Less than what I'll pay to bury the people who hurt her. She smiled. You talk like a hero. You look like a brand. Shall we see which wins? 2 agents glided from the hedges with the choreography of ghosts. Sophia raised her hands, demure. No weapon, she said, and reached delicately into her bag. Adrian moved hand up, signal flying, but it wasn't a gun. It was a small black remote. She pressed the button. Inside the ballroom, the lights hiccuped. The string quartet wobbled. A low haze rolled out of the vents, subtle as a rumor. People paused, blinked, looked around, then began to cough. One by one, confusion knitting a wet blanket over the crowd. The exits jammed. Instinct knows a trap before the mind does. You poisoned them? Adrian shouted above the clatter of dropped crystal. It's not poison, Sophia said pleasantly. It's persuasion, a neuroagent. A few hours of mild paralysis and vaporized short-term memory. They'll forget the briefings your foundation gave them last quarter about a handful of shipping routes. The ones that aren't shipping textbooks. How many? He asked, because numbers make monsters bite their tongues. Enough. Open every vent, Adrian barked into his cum. Fresh air, now get EMT staged at the south entrance. Stagger evacuations. He turned back to the roses. Sophia was gone. By midnight, the ball had become a triage, and the Palmetto's PR officer had aged a decade. Adrian's jet wheels kissed the tarmac at a small airfield upstate. The cabin where Nia was supposed to be safe smelled like pine and someone else's coffee. 2 agents lay on the floor, breathing but asleep. The back door hung open with a stupid, cheerful creak. They took her, Rowan said, voice flat enough to cut. Adrian stared at the spot on the rug where Nia's backpack had been. On the coffee table, under a coaster because she had manners, lay a note in perfect, careful print. You're late. In the SUV bumping through the dark, Mia sat with her wrists taped, her chin high, her eyes dry. Across from her, Sophia held a necklace Nia hadn't seen since she was 7. I kept it, she said softly. You were always mine. No, Nia said, steady. I was yours until I learned what love is. They drove deeper into the Catskills to a facility with still bones and new nerves. Inside, a woman in a lab coat smiled kindly at Nia. I'm Dr. Laurent. We're going to take a small blood sample. No, Nia said. You're going to take a step back. The siren started before anyone touched a needle. Not fire alarms, not police. Helicopter. Impact thud. A single door bloomed inward like a wound, and Adrian walked through it with 2 agents and a fraction of mercy. He looked like every story you tell about men who do not run. Step away from her, he said, and something in the room listened. Sophia reached into her coat and found nothing but air. Adrian tossed a tablet onto the floor. It sprang to life files, timestamps, photos, audio, and Sophia's voice from 2 weeks earlier. If the girl screams, don't stop. We need the sample. Her father's opinions are irrelevant now. Even Dr. Lawrence stepped away. Hours later, the federal vans were full. The lab was taped in yellow, and Sophia sat cuffed in a chair looking bored. You think it ends here? She told Adrian mildly. It never ends. Knowledge replicates. Then we'll replicate decency, Adrian said. For a little while, Normal tried to find them. It kept missing, but it tried. Nia slept in overlit rooms with a guard at the door. She woke to Rowan saying words like chain of custody and sealed indictments and federal grand jury. The morning the indictment dropped, Adrian recorded a statement in a studio that smelled like coffee and sincerity. To everyone listening, he said, eyes not leaving the lens. A person I trusted lied to me and tried to kill me. The person who saved me was my daughter. You should listen to your daughters. Nia helped Rowan upload the files to a secure press portal. You're not scared? He asked, not unkindly. I am, she said. But scared people still have to do the right thing. The story broke like glass on tile. Taksha set out plates of outrage. Think pieces tried to think. A lieutenant from the Army's ethics board knocked on the safe house door to deliver a small black envelope with a patch inside, a golden olive branch encircling the words, valor through truth. Unofficial, she said to Nia, voice shaking a little, but earned. My sister was in one of their early trials. Your testimony opened her case. Before breakfast the next day, a secure channel pinned, Zurich, funds moving, buyer in motion. Sophia's network wasn't running, it was pruning. We'll never get the warrants fast enough, Rowan gritted. International cooperation is a line of the DMV with better suits. We don't need to be official, Adrian said grimly. We need to be there. 3 days later, they were wheels down in Kefalonia, the air rosemary and salt. The research yacht rode the water like a secret. They watched from the curve of the cliffs, the drone feed flickering on a tablet in Rowan's hands. We don't go in loud, he said. We use her. Adrian's head whipped around. Absolutely not. But Nia was already stepping into the moonlight, chin lifted. She spent years teaching me to be quiet, she said. I won't be quiet anymore. The guards on the gangway blinked at a child walking calmly through the night. One of them radioed. A voice crackled back, let her in. Of course, let her in. Sophia, in white again, of course religiously on-brand, turned when the door whispered open. You came, she said, as if greeting a guest who had remembered the dress code. You expected me, Nia said. I hoped. You're brave. I learned from the best, Nia said dryly. You almost killed my dad because he got in the way of your data transfer schedule. That's not bravery. That's strategy, Sophia said. History thinks strategists. You mean villains, Nia said. This you? The lights flickered. The hull shuddered. Adrian and Torres moved through the lab like winter. Rowan hit the control room and slammed an open palm onto the console. Shut it down. Kill power and we risk losing evidence, the tech protested. Nia stepped forward before Adrian could. Pull the plug. The yacht sighed, as if relieved, and went suddenly impossibly quiet. Emergency lights bled red into the corridors. In that soft apocalypse, Sophia lifted her wrists for the cuffs like a queen offering hands to be kissed. You'll regret this, she said to Adrian. He met her eyes. Not today. On the flight home, stars outside the cabin windows looked like a jury of angels taking notes. Adrian dozed upright for 9 minutes. Nia dozed for 10. They both dreamed of a chapel under a willow and a handkerchief burning without fire. 2 months later, in a hearing room in D.C. that smelled faintly of varnish and television makeup, Nia told the truth on a microphone that had heard every lie in the world and was bored of them. The senators rearranged their faces into interest and concern. One of them asked, in that honeyed way powerful people do when they think they're being gentle, whether she understood the gravity of accusing a woman of such stature. I understand gravity just fine, Nia said, steady. It is what kept pulling me back to tell someone again, even after people didn't want to hear. Detective Rowan followed with the receipts, trial logs, dosage charts, memos anonymizing human beings into acronyms, voice notes so cold they fogged the room. Genius does not excuse harm, he said, not as a flourish, but like a grocery item in a list. The trial was ugly and long and uncinematic. Sophia's lawyers tried to launder evil with ambition, spun her as a misunderstood pioneer, suggested Nia had been manipulated by a grieving father. But then Theo hobbled in with a brace and a grin and said, I drove the lady. I heard the lady. The lady is lying. There is not a jury on earth that doesn't like a blue-collar man who refuses to be fancy. When the guilty verdict arrived after 9 hours of deliberation, the courtroom throbbed with an exhale. As marshals led Sophia away, she looked at Nia and for the first and last time flinched into something like loss. Quiet tried again. This time it found them more often. Spring rolled over the city like a soft apology. Nia split her time between school and the piano, between calls with a mentor from the National Youth Bioethics Forum and weekend shifts at a community clinic where the Band-Aids had cartoon animals on them and the coffee could remove paint. She wrote an essay called Consent at 13, and Harvard sent a letter with a seal and the words full scholarship and the phrase per medical bioethics track. Adrian read it and laughed and then sat down heavily and did not speak for a minute because some joys are too big for language. On the night before graduation, their living room filled with neighbors and lemon bars and the soft chatter of people who had chosen to stay. Detective Rowan showed up in a jacket with elbow patches he pretended he'd always owned. "You ready?" he asked Nia. "I don't know if I'm ready for anything," she admitted. "Good," he said. "That means you are. Just do it for the plot." Under a canopy of elms the next morning, Nia took a stage built by men with calloused hands and gave a speech that didn't make anyone cry until it did. "I'm here because someone believed me the moment it mattered most," she said. "Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a voice that says, 'I believe you.' When the room doesn't, sometimes it's a little black girl in a blue dress who refuses to sit down." The applause built like storm rain. But this time, no one was afraid of thunder. Years later, on certain afternoons, hospital corridors would catch a rumor. Dr. Nia Lockname etched on a placard outside the pediatric ethics department, walking with a coffee she never finished, sleeves pushed up, patience like armor. Students would stop her to ask about the case that changed federal policy. She would smile and say policy didn't change, people did. They would nod, then go argue with a vending machine. On her desk sat a folded photo, a man and a girl under elm trees, his tie crooked, her cap tilted, both laughing too hard for the camera to keep up. On the back, in her careful print, "For the man who taught me what it means to be believed. For the silence we broke together." When the story occasionally rose from the archives, another lecture, another think piece, another week where the news found a way to be worse, it came back not as a saga of villains in couture and labs with glass hearts, but as a simple math problem. 1 voice plus 1 ear equals miracle. That was it. That was all of it. And on a winter night years after the handkerchief burned without fire, Adrian stood at a window older and easier and watched snow soften the city's angles. Nia, home for a weekend and already correcting his posture, came to stand beside him. They didn't say anything for a long minute because some silences are more sacred than any hymn. He took a breath. "You scared me that day," he said finally, "at the conservatory. I thought you just didn't want me to move on. I should have known." "You did," she said, bumping his shoulder with hers. "When it counted." The snow went on falling in that generous, ordinary way snow has. Somewhere in a drawer, Nia still kept a cheap pair of disposable gloves because talismans are rational and holy. Somewhere in a lab, a student wrote the words assent and minor in a margin and underlined them twice. Somewhere a little girl practiced saying the word no in a bathroom mirror and liked how it sounded in her mouth. Justice may nap. It may yawn and stretch and wander off to stare out a window, but it doesn't die. It wakes. It remembers who stayed awake for it. And sometimes when the music cuts out and the room goes still, justice clears its throat in a girl's voice and says, "Stop. Don't touch that. Listen to me."